our population growth, is well above the GDP growth rate. This was another concern expressed there. How do we deal with this situation?
I think that's something that we need to look at as part of the structural reform going on. And that is that our population growth is around 3%. And ideally, a country should be growing higher than its population for the impact to be felt by the average person. Now, ideally, I would even double it, as some economists indicate, which means that the ideal growth rate for Nigeria should be 6%, not where we are right now, which is at best we're looking at around 2.5% by the on an annual average, because yeah, first quarter number was disappointing. However, when you look at the cyclicality, I think the other 3 quarters ahead may be better. Unfortunately, if it doesn't, then we are going to be in a serious funk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, private-public partnership was also identified as a way to attract private investment. But do we have the right environment for PPP to thrive? We don't seem to have seen too many success stories.
Yes,
there.
in fact, one of the things that NESG has raised quite recently is actually even the apparent lack of clarity between the BPE and the ICRC. Now, who is in charge of PPP concessioning of some of these infrastructure or infrastructure that need to be privatized on a PPP basis? Now, there is lack of clarity there, and I think the executive arm of government need to step in and clearly articulate that, so that both domestic and foreign investors would have clarity over who is responsible and who should they go to ensure that that PPP arrangement can be quickly fast-tracked.
Though for NESG, I mean, it's a public-private partnership kind of organization. Where do you come in this?
We advocate for it, because what we see is that we ourselves are basically an umbrella or an organization that is representative of the organized private sector. And where there is pain that the private sector feels, we usually make that clear to government. And we have in 1 or 2 of our meetings last week.
Okay. So some concerns were also raised about foreign exchange policies in the region. What are the current shortcomings, in that area?
Well, the region has different FX policies. I think bringing it down to home, at least the report is quite positive about the Nigerian posture. However, they just feel that some of the economies where FX policies lack clarity, they need to have it market-driven and lesser intervention in that regard. So I think the general consensus is basically advancing of structural reforms, which also include FX policies that reduces market distortions, meaning that there has to be clarity in this reforms that is going on in the various countries in the Sub-Saharan Africa, whereby whether it is FX or any other type of market, the distortions should be dampened.
Okay. Well, the report highlighted the absence of political will, to undertake some of these important reforms that you have talked about. How relevant is this to Nigerian situation?
In Nigeria, as we are marching towards elections, and generally speaking, in any country when elections is approaching, governments tend to pull on the brakes when it comes to certain harsh or harsher reform postures. Generally, they tend to be expansionary in nature, and because a government that is political would want to actually play the political card to see that they get re-elected, et cetera, and therefore some of the reforms may be slowed down, or it may not even happen if it is going to be seen negatively by the voters. So whether, be it Nigeria or any other country, when elections are coming, you would find that some of the reforms that were started, if they were hard, they may either postpone them or they may drop it altogether until after the elections.
Okay, so only recently, if I recall, the governors complained about the huge sums of funds not remitted to the Federation account by some agencies of government. Are these not more potent sources of revenue that we are talking about here,
yes,
that are yet to be properly harnessed?
Indeed. I think what we are saying here is that there are collections going on. However, the collections are not going into the treasury. That's one. But two, as a total, the collections that the government is getting, whether it's, or in fact, if you remove the oil sector taxes, even that 3% becomes horribly lower. And so there is that tendency to say that with TSA that the current government has followed through and implemented, the collections, we're seeing it in some of the agencies of government where a particular agency that had never remitted more than, I don't remember what the amount was, 5 million or something like that, recently was remitting billions. So that means that there is, the leakages are being blocked, and that should increase the government revenues.
Okay, just a quick one before I let you go. What's your assessment of the coordination between the fiscal authority and the monetary authority?
I say that there is still a gap. We do not see a coordinated fiscal and monetary policy because what we have seen is that on the fiscal side, since the beginning of the recession, we've seen the spending, and whereas on the monetary side, we see moves that basically curtail liquidity, which means that mopping up of liquidity. And I know that the eye is on the needle as far as the MPC is concerned on inflation and inflationary trends rather than expansionary posture.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Kyari.
You're welcome.
Bukar Kyari is the chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit.